Good evening, everyone. On a Monday night at 6 o'clock Eastern Time, I'm feeling good, ready to talk some college football here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, and our reserved spot for Notre Dame talk here on our live stream. And of course, all college football fans are welcome to take part in the live chat. So jump on in, invite your family, your friends, your college football, social media acquaintances for the next hour. We're talking Notre Dame football right here, but that leaves you wide open to talk about whatever you want to in the live chat. Bring your comments, your questions, your debate topics for Mason Plummer from Slap the Sign. You see him down below, and also Nathan Urbach, also from Slap the Sign. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good, Mark. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Hopefully everything is still going just fine with both of you, family and friends, and everyone near and dear to you.
Yeah, doing well. Thankful my dad's a barber. Finally got a haircut today, so happy for that. My hair was getting long. Looks like Nathan's
my son or
too.
daughter is going to be converted to barber here pretty soon. It's coming. It doesn't look awful right now, but it's got to need some serious product to be slicked back, a lot more than I like to use. So it's got to that point where it's just like the slicked back look all the time, and it's a bit much.
You got the James Bond look going. I kind of like it.
Is that what we're going for there? Okay.
I think so.
There are worse people to be compared to. I guess I can take that. All right.
Yeah, my hair's
what it's just long. That's all you can say about it.
I'm just happy it is. I've been wanting to grow it out for a while, and this quarantine's been a nice excuse.
You've been wanting to grow it out, like you're restricted from growing it out otherwise?
I think my job and stuff,
Okay.
It was hard to do it without maybe not necessarily getting in trouble, but just I don't know. Now I can kind of figure out a way how to style it and stuff like that when I go back.
That or the wifey, huh?
She hates the beard, but I told her I'm not shaving until the quarantine's over.
Well, women are unpredictable when it comes to that because some of them love the facial hair. Others hate the facial hair. I've certainly had it both ways. And when it comes to the long hair, I've certainly been subject to it both ways. Like, grow your hair. It looks great. It's wavy. It's this, it's that. Or no, cut it. It needs to be short. It needs to look professional. It needs to look good. I've heard both.
I've only ever had the short hair look. I've always tried to grow it out, but there's like that awkward stage in between long and short, and I can't do it.
So where I am right now.
Sorry about that. I was letting my dog on the patio, but she was making a ruckus. So
I don't know if you guys have yet to analyze the hair choices of one Pat Coogan, but certainly we can do it based on his 247 Sports composite photo here. He's looking rather dapper in his red high school jersey with a Nike logo on the front. So everybody involved with Notre Dame football that wants a top offensive lineman to come into the fold from Chicago here can check out his picture on 247 or a number of sites, of course. Both of our gentlemen right here from Slap the Sign, of course. So we want to give them their full due. So check out their work, of course. But Pat Coogan, offensive guard, 21st ranked at his position out of Chicago, 2021 class, of course, Marist High School, 14th rated player out of a decent football playing state, Nathan, in Illinois.
Yeah, he's from a program that Notre Dame knows pretty well. They had a tight end and Nick Wisher that came out of that program a little bit ago. And they recruit that program pretty well overall. I think he has a chance to be a 4-star at the end of his recruitment. He has a lot of flexibility. I think Notre Dame likes him as a probably an interior guy, probably a guard, more likely than not. But I do think he has some tackle ability as well. He's right on that cusp. I think he's rated 470 or something like that, which is a pretty high level 3-star. So, which is fine. I mean, Notre Dame recruits offensive line talent really well, and when they land guys, even whether they're 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars, they tend to work out, especially if they're starters. So, no, I wouldn't be surprised if the guy had a pretty successful career at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. And just looking at his recent offer list has skyrocketed his the priority of Notre Dame getting him. It seemed like he was a guy that once he got the Notre Dame offer that he was going to take it and accept it and pledge to the Notre Dame 2021 class. Grew up a Notre Dame fan. Notre Dame recruits the Chicago area well. He's a solid player and somebody that will definitely be interesting to watch the next couple of years.
Yeah, I
Just
think
have
like
a
Mason
on
said, sorry, go ahead.
Nathan. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like Mason said, after the Notre Dame offer, I believe he got Ohio State right away. Oklahoma was another one that came in at LSU, I believe. So he's got a pretty high level offer list for his recruiting ranking for sure.
Talking Notre Dame football here on Monday nights, 6 o'clock Eastern time. Please let your folks out there know that you talk to on social media, family and friends that love Notre Dame football, that love college football, period, to join us here every Monday night. Nathan Erbach in the middle there from Slap the Sign. Also from Slap the Sign is Mason Plummer. All right, talking about Notre Dame's latest commitment to what is forming to be a pretty decent recruiting class, but not necessarily elite. We ran a poll question last week. It's on Twitter, in which we asked whether Notre Dame had the capabilities in today's college football landscape to recruit at an elite level. And we defined that as top 5 recruiting classes year in, year out. I will check out those results and pass those along, as I believe that poll was resulted and finished up earlier today. All right, the NFL draft is upcoming, and the next poll you're going to see at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, on my Twitter page will be this: with the NFL draft upcoming on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, who is going to have the most successful NFL career out of the Notre Dame players that will be drafted this weekend? Again, you can leave your responses in the live chat, but they won't necessarily count, as we're going to bring this to our YouTube channel and leave that at my YouTube channel, Mark Rogers TV, and deliver that between now and next week's show. But Mason, we'll start with you in regards to how do you see, maybe not necessarily the best player in college, but the guy that's going to project best to the next level?
I think it's got to be, whether it's Julian Okwara or Cole Kmet, both guys I see going in the first round. I think it's going to be either one of them. Julian Okwara, purely from a pass rush standpoint, rushing the quarterback on third down, that's what he's best at. He's not super great at stopping the run. We saw that this past season. But speaking purely of getting after the quarterback, he's one of the best Notre Dame's had, and he's going to be great in the National Football League. As well as Cole Kmet, he's a generational tight end and somebody that has the size, speed, and capability to exceed at the next level. So, yeah, I think both those guys are going to have great NFL careers. If I had to pick one, I'd say probably Okwara, just because of how much success the edge pass rushers have that play in a similar way like he does.
Yeah, I'm on Okwara as well for that. I think his upside's through the roof. If he didn't get hurt this year, we'd probably still be looking at a surefire first rounder. He's just one of those guys that, like Mason said, he won't necessarily defend the run at an elite level, but you're talking about a guy that has 10 to 15 sack every year ability. So, I mean, he's probably one of the best pass rushers to come out of Notre Dame in the last 20 years or so, and I think just got kind of more as your traditional pass rusher too. So I mean, we've had Stephon Tuitt come out, but he's kind of more of an interior guy now, I think, with Pittsburgh. So no, Okwara has a lot of edge talent, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking back at some of those remocks in 5-6 years, and he's like a top 15 level guy for sure.
Nathan, what does the draft list look like? How many players do we expect to get drafted?
I think we're probably looking for sure 6. Probably, maybe not probably, but possibly 7, and then like an outside chance at 8. But I would go for sure. Like I would say probably 6 to 7 guys for sure.
So last week our poll question was, can Notre Dame recruit at an elite level? And if you want that defined, we talked about top 5 recruiting classes in the current landscape of college football. 45 votes in here. So full disclaimer that if I post these questions on my YouTube page, on the community section of my YouTube page, it's been shown over the last several months, we'll get 600 or 700 votes. But we're putting these on Twitter, first of all, because they'll be counted. And secondly, because we're pushing people over to the Twitter page. So I was tempted to throw this on the YouTube channel and get these 600 or 700 votes, but we only got 45 on Twitter. So the yes vote was 58% of respondents, and we don't know if they're Notre Dame fans or not, said that Notre Dame should be able to recruit elite players. And of course, they do recruit elite players. And we pretty much determined in looking at the recruiting classes ranging in that 8 to 12 range that there's about a 3 to 4 player gap, something in that range between what a Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan recruits on a yearly basis in that 8 to 12 range versus Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. Clemson now, they've only been recruiting at an elite level for a couple years, but Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, there's probably that 3 to 5 players that would make the difference between Notre Dame stepping it up to that level and less 3 stars and more high-end 4 and maybe another 2 5 stars, something in that range.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week, obviously. It doesn't necessarily mean, like I think I mentioned this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go from landing 22 guys to 25 guys on a yearly basis necessarily, but they have to replace 3 of those guys with 3 better recruits per se. The one thing that I think bothered me about the question on Twitter to how people took it was that they took it as that Notre Dame doesn't I don't even know what I'm trying to say right now, but I think it was perceived as Notre Dame doesn't try to land elite players versus I think you had like one comment on there that they could recruit at an elite level if they wanted to. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I mean, I think that they want to recruit at an elite level. They don't necessarily put the importance on football that maybe Alabama, LSU, Georgia does on a yearly basis. I think that their education and different things like that take a lot of priority over maybe some other schools. And I think that was kind of construed to say that they didn't necessarily land really good classes because they do. So I think that was sort of a misconception of the Twitter poll.
I kind of got that vibe too, that people were saying, that they don't want to. Of course, they want to recruit at the highest level possible. And there was even a guy that was adding me saying, Notre Dame doesn't put the money into recruiting, as if Lance Taylor and all the other assistant coaches aren't flying across the country day in and day out to see guys. Lance Taylor is seeing Will Shipley, before COVID-19, he was seeing him weekly. So trying to tell me that Georgia and Alabama put 10 times as much money into recruiting, which is absolutely false. So it's not a matter of money. It's Notre Dame is different, and recruiting at Notre Dame is different. It's just as simple as so.
I think that since we're not the ones putting in the work and putting in the time and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears, it's easy to criticize. I can't imagine that any program at the level of, again, I'm going to point out that tier below the elite, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan. Those are the 3 that come to mind. You could name a few other schools, not a whole lot, obviously, because there's only a few on that next level. If you're putting forth the facilities, the time, the effort, selecting the best coaching staff you can possibly put together, and all the money and effort and time, and these guys work tireless hours throughout the off season. If you're doing all that and you're putting together recruiting classes that are 8th, 11th, 9th, it's ridiculous to say that you don't want to have a top 5 recruiting class. You're putting forth all the effort. Now, 8 to 10 is good. We don't want to be any better than that. No, that's ridiculous, because it's not necessarily that Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama are working any harder. Maybe they are. We could go through all the different cases. Maybe Iowa State's working harder than anybody in the country. We don't know that. We can't gauge that. But I've got to think that it has very little to do with effort and want and desire to be great.
Yeah, what you're saying has more to do with the coaching staff of at the time than anything else. I mean, I think you have certain coaching staffs that have grinders on the trail. They connect with kids at to a certain level. And I think at least under Brian Kelly's tenure at Notre Dame, I think that's maybe been an issue to a certain extent. I don't think Brian Kelly's necessarily the biggest recruiter there is, or he's not a grinder on the trail like maybe a Kirby Smart is, for example. But that has nothing to do with Notre Dame's effort level in general, I guess. So, you bring another coach in there and it could change, or you bring, certain assistants in there that grind really hard, like Chip Long, for example. He was really good at that. Lance Taylor, the new running backs coach, seems to be a guy that is like that too. So I think it has more to do with that than it does the program itself.
Yeah, and it's okay to have different kinds of recruiters. Like you said, there's the Chip Longs and Lance Taylors of the world that are grinders, and there's a guy like Brian Kelly who prefers to be on the player developmental side of things, or he's the opener. He'll meet a guy on his first visit, and he's the closer. He'll really solidify a guy when he's just about to commit. So, I'd like to see Brian Kelly more involved. He lost a couple guys that could have potentially went to Notre Dame. Jalen McMillan comes to mind, as well as there's another corner as well. But so Brian Kelly's working on getting more involved. You think he'd be more inept to that in his first 10 years at Notre Dame? But he's seeing what it takes now to get to a top 5 recruiting class, and I think they have the blueprint for it, especially with a couple of grinders in Elston as well. So I think he just needs to join in with them and recruit just that little bit harder and get into that elite group.
GM, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We recognize that you appreciate what we bring here on a daily basis, and thank you so much for that contribution. Interesting comment made by Dennis Wilson. So Dennis joins us on a ton of live streams. He's a Miami fan. We love Dennis. He's been watching for a long time. We had an interesting debate last night. So not Dennis and I, but I had a call-in show, and one particular call-in mentioned this particular caller wanted to pin me down on whether Miami was an elite program. And so my response was, are we talking about right now, or are you talking about at some particular point in time, or are you talking about historically over the entire length of the history of college football? Because this is how I'll answer it. Has Miami been elite in the past? Yes. I can give you the years in which Miami's been elite, basically early 80s to mid 90s, and then for about 3 years around 2001, 02, 03. Right now, there's no question Miami is not an elite football program. And historically, I will argue they are not an elite football program when basically their success is in 15 years of 100 plus years of football. So that war was waged for probably 45 minutes back and forth on definitions of elite and who's not elite and how you measure that. And this particular person wanted to lock it on 4 national championships. That if you've won 4 national championships, and then I served up all sorts of elite programs then. Minnesota's elite, so forth and so on. So it turned out to be a bit of a ridiculous conversation because I hold people accountable and they need to define terms and set standards and can't be wishy-washy and changing their bar every 3 minutes during the conversation. So Dennis has brought this to Notre Dame because Notre Dame was brought up last night. I don't even give it one split second of thought if somebody asks me, is Notre Dame historically an elite football program? Yes. Notre Dame has arguably the greatest football tradition in the history of the sport. Now, can that change? This is constantly evolving year after year's being played. And if you're Clemson, are they historically elite? I would argue no. But are they playing themselves toward that end? Yeah. If they do what they've done for the last 5 years for another 15 or 20 years, yes, they will move themselves at some point. And it can be argued. I'm not saying that my judgment is perfect. I'm just saying that it's a fluid situation, but it takes a while to historically change status. Yes, Notre Dame. Yeah, if Notre Dame goes 2-10 for the next 50 years, I'll no longer say that they're historically elite, but that has yet to take place, and they're not doing anything drastically bad that's going to change that. So Dennis is asking here, why is Notre Dame considered a blue blood football program? My quick answer would be, if you look at wins, relevance, championships, all added up over time, they are right up there with the best in the history of college football.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I think you said it best. There's not really anything more to add. I mean, They have they're up there in national championships. They're up there in wins. They're up there in winning percentage. You know, they're still relevant today. I mean, I know they haven't won a national championship since 1988. We can argue 93, but we won't get into that again. But, you know, I mean, they've been to the playoff in the last, you know, couple of years. They've been to a national championship game in the last 10 years. I mean, if Notre Dame's not a blue blood program, there's like only 4 blue blood programs. So, I mean, I don't know how else to classify that overall.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're talking about what makes a blue blood program or an elite program, to me, it wins, it's national championships, Heisman winners, appearances, all of that. And then what are the teams that you think of when you think of traditionally great programs? If you ask anybody who knows a little bit about college football, Notre Dame's one of the first 3 to 5 they say. You know, whether that's all in the past or not, as Nathan said, just within the past 10 years or so, Notre Dame's become more relevant on a national scale, and it's only going upward at the moment with Kelly at the reins. So, yeah, I think Notre Dame is definitely an elite program, no doubt about it.
And not to get nitpicky about it, but if you're going to separate the terms elite versus blue blood speaks to an old royalty term that basically means from the origin of that particular government country that it was established, this is royalty. And if you want to go by that, then if you want to stick to the letter of the law of that, then it can never change. I don't necessarily think that's the spirit of the term in college football, that you would have to maintain that blue blood status. But where the term comes from, it's more of an establishment thing versus if Clemson goes, if Northwestern goes undefeated for the next 20 years in a row and wins 20 consecutive national championships, by the definition of blue blood, they can never be a blue blood regardless of what they do, because they were never a blue blood. It's in your veins. It's destined. It's established from the beginning. It's royalty.
Yeah. So if we base it off elite, I think Notre Dame's in the second tier right now of college football. I think there's 4 to 5 programs right now that are considered elite on a yearly basis from a recruiting standpoint, from an on the field standpoint. They've won national championships recently, et cetera. And then there's Notre Dame, there's Michigan, there's Oklahoma. Maybe you could throw Georgia into that too, because even though they recruit at a high level, they haven't, they've been to a national championship, but they didn't win it. So, I mean, but like right now it's pretty much Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama. If you want to put Georgia in there, I wouldn't necessarily argue with you. But LSU obviously just won it this year, so maybe they're kind of on their way. So, yeah, I mean, I would agree. Elite and blue blood are completely different, because if you were looking at – if you told me blue blood, Notre Dame would be top 3 to 5, like Mason mentioned. If you mentioned elite programs currently, they wouldn't be in my top 3 to 5 probably. They'd probably be maybe 5, but like probably in the 6 to 10 range.
Yeah, and that's exactly to Mark's point where, times change, and what you're talking about elite at one point, a blue blood at one point, or I guess blue bloods are forever, but elite changes, from year to year, from decade to decade. So just depends on, who the coaches are, who the players are, and almost from, as I'm saying, from year to year, it just depends. Like you said, if you're talking about Clemson 7-10 years ago, they're not elite, but they most definitely are now. So,
and I'm certainly not going to, again, give my opinion to say this is the opinion and this should be the defining components of elite status. I'm just one person giving my thoughts and how I look at it. Let's take Alabama. If Alabama goes 4-8 this year, I'm not going to suddenly say they're no longer elite. It would have to be some sort of a trend for me. If they go 4-8 for 3 consecutive years, I'm going to say they're not elite anymore for whatever reason, whatever happened there, they're not elite anymore. But if they go 4-8 this year, I'm going to say, well, that was really weird. That was strange. Let's see what happens this year.
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, that's like what Notre Dame got in 2016. They had a down year, but then they built it right back up, and now they've won. Now they've 3 consecutive years of 10+ wins. They have 11 one year, 12 one year. So, I think every program, no matter who you are, can have some sort of fluctuation as long as it's not consistent fluctuation.
Right. Ups and downs are somewhat normal depending on your program, but looking in the grand scheme of things, continued success is really what you're looking at.
Dennis enjoys poking the bear. Why has Notre Dame been a playoff punching bag for teams? Going to the playoffs once and losing, I don't know that makes you necessarily a playoff punching bag like that's happened 8 times.
Not like Oklahoma.
That's what I was going to say. Oklahoma's much more of a punching bag than Notre Dame is.
Absolutely. Yeah, Oklahoma's on an 0-for-4 run during the college football playoff era. Is it 4? Yeah, I believe it's 4. I think they missed twice out of the 6 years. The other 4 losses were not very competitive. One of them was very competitive. They took Georgia to overtime. The other 3 games, not competitive.
Speaking of which, this might bring up a good debate in the live comments. One of my biggest pet peeves about the college football playoff seems to be if your team goes and loses by a lot and it's not necessarily a competitive game by the final score, fans and even experts like Paul Feinbaum believe that you don't necessarily deserve to be back there the next year or the year after, like that team has anything to do with the previous teams. I think it's one of the, like, for example, like Oklahoma, like we'll just use Oklahoma because I'm obviously a Notre Dame fan and Notre Dame writer. Oklahoma absolutely deserves to be in the playoff next year if they go 12-0, 13-0, maybe even with 1 loss. I mean, obviously they deserve it, and so does Notre Dame, even though they got boat raced by Clemson and Alabama in their most recent championship or playoff performances.
I get the thought that, do we as a college football fan base, as college football nation, really trust that Oklahoma can compete with those other schools, or fill in the blank, Notre Dame maybe? I get that conception or that thought going into a playoff. Do we really want to see this school back in there to get their butts kicked? I get that, but should that factor into the determination of whether they've earned a spot? No, we can't look at last year or any other year. Can you imagine if the NFL playoffs that the Cincinnati Bengals lost 8 consecutive games in the NFL playoffs year after year after year? No, they went 11-5 this year. They earned a playoff, so we're going to leave them out just because we really don't think that they're going to perform well in the playoffs this year. No, you just have to evaluate the team based on that season.
No, absolutely. I don't know if Mason wants to add anything.
Yeah, well, all I was going to say is that, teams are different from year to year, and I think it's really the most important thing when you're evaluating that is having the 4 best teams, regardless of whether a team got boat raced a few years back. That's a completely different team, and you want the 4 best teams regardless, regardless of the name, regardless of whatever. They could be A, B, C, and D for all I care. If you have the 4 best teams in it, that's how the playoff should be ran.
And sort of like you mentioned, Mark, I think hypothetically speaking, team goes in, well, let's just use Notre Dame, for example, when they lost to Clemson 30-3. If the year after that, which would have been last year, they go 11-1 and they're ranked, like 4th or 5th the entire season, and another team like Ohio State or Oklahoma, for example, is ranked similarly, I could understand maybe the committee and fans wanting someone different for that season. But it's kind of like you mentioned, you have to evaluate the team based off that season and not previous years, not future seasons. So, I mean, like, who knows? Maybe it's a completely different roster. I don't know. In Notre Dame's case, obviously Ian Book was still there, so the quarterback was the same. A lot of the guys were still the same, but they lost their leading receiver. They lost, I think it was Quentin Nelson on the playoff team. No, that was the year after, I believe, Quentin Nelson. So, I mean, it's like, guys leave, guys come in, recruiting classes improve, so on and so forth. So that's my biggest thing with that argument, is that maybe for 1 year you hold it against them if it's close, but looking forward 5 years down the road when everybody from that roster is completely gone and in the NFL or in their normal lives, that's where it becomes kind of a weird thing for me.
One of my favorite supporters right there. Pineru 5 Piru. Hit the like, salute Mark. Always throws the salute in there. I like that. I'm going to come on the show and try. So Pineru 5 Piru, he's a staunch Michigan fan, as you can see right there. He joins us for all the live streams, takes a beating during the Ohio State live stream, but shows up every time. Good to see him again tonight. We got Patrick, obviously an Irish fan. You got Ohio State fans. Fan base is represented all over the place. Talking Notre Dame NFL draft, the Pat Coogan commitment, offensive guard out of Chicago, top 20 player at that position. And again, jump on over to Mark Rogers TV on Twitter, and I will be posting that poll regarding Notre Dame's best NFL player in the current class. Something's funny. What happened?
You got to look at the comments. We got to acknowledge that. Throw that back up on the screen.
What, that?
No, it's MSU number one fan. Second most recent comment.
Oh, I'm way behind. I'm at let's see, it's 6:38 right now. I'm at 6:13, so I'll catch up here. We'll keep going. We will get to it.
All right.
Oh.
Dennis Wilson doesn't quit. I'll give you that.
No, he stays after it. In my 45 years, Tim Brown and the Bus have been Notre Dame's best players. Okay.
I don't know. I don't even know if that's supposed to be an insult or not, but I'll take it.
No, considering they're both in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I would hope that that's a pretty straightforward comment. I don't think there's any room for insult there. Ian Book being your greatest quarterback ever.
Yeah, somebody snapped back with a Joe Montana comment, but I guess there it is. It depends if we're talking college or NFL.
Yeah, and that also has to be considered. Certainly, if somebody jumps into the NFL and they make a name for themselves and become great, then suddenly they're great college players. And sometimes that wasn't the case, and people would be surprised to see some stats from some highly premier NFL quarterbacks to go back and look at their, especially in past generations when they didn't throw the ball so much. I watched a Football Life, Joe Namath, and he was the number one pick. The New York Jets broke the bank and threw $400,000 at him in 1965. And I went back and looked at his numbers, and I wasn't surprised. I think many people in this chat would be shocked to see his touchdown interception ratio and numbers from Alabama, because the guy was just off the charts, considered the best quarterback in the nation, but they're throwing like 8 passes a game.
I mean, Joe Montana, I believe, had a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio at Notre Dame. I think he threw like 32. I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure it was completely even.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of where Mason was getting at. I mean, look at Tom Brady's stats at Michigan. They weren't anything crazy, and obviously he went 6th round, and now he's arguably the best player ever. So I don't know if most Michigan fans would consider him the best quarterback in Michigan history, to be completely honest.
You are dead on, Nathan. 3 years at Notre Dame for Joe Montana, 25 touchdowns, 25 picks, 52% completion percentage. Those numbers went up slightly in the NFL. Slightly, yes. Slightly,
just slightly.
Meaning, yes, they skyrocketed in regards to his efficiency and so forth. So I don't exactly know where that comes from. I just know that the game is play at that point in time. The game in which Joe Montana entered the NFL, the proliferation of the passing game really took off during the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, I don't know, because I mean, it's like you mentioned. I mean, obviously, even Joe Montana. I don't think he wasn't a first-round pick, but he was still fairly highly regarded going into the NFL, and he turned out to be, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. So definitely different times. I mean, now if he were to have his numbers, and people would be commenting on, I think Jordan Love is kind of the guy this year that everybody's kind of wondering why he's a first-round pick, because last year he had like 17 touchdowns and 16 interceptions, and everybody says if you throw interceptions in college, you're going to continue that into the NFL. And I think that's more true now. And that was one of my numbers on Sam Darnold. A lot of people put him as a Jay Cutler type, and I was like, well, look at Jay Cutler's numbers in college compared to Sam Darnold's. I mean, Jay Cutler was the better prospect. Personally, it's just a different thing. I mean, you throw interceptions in the NFL doesn't mean necessarily throwing them in college. But
All right, talking Notre Dame football every Monday night, 6 o'clock Eastern time. We got Nathan Erbach. We've got Mason Plummer on the line. You can join both of them on a Slap the Sign. The NFL draft is upcoming this weekend, April 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Please check out my NFL draft profiles of players all over the map, most notably with Rick Saratella from NFL Draft Bible joining us on a regular basis there. Check out the Twitter poll we posted last week in regards to Notre Dame drafting at an elite or recruiting at an elite level. And this week's poll involves the NFL draft and Notre Dame's most potential in regards to what player will have the most successful career for Notre Dame.
So like we talked about earlier, just maybe we get into a little bit more NFL draft talk now, considering it's this week. We mentioned Julian Aquara and Cole Kmet as guys that could be first-round selections, possibly, probably day two selections. But you have Chase Claypool right there as well, who could be a second-round pick, maybe a first-round pick if a team really likes him. You have the two safeties, Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott. They should. It looks like Gilman's for sure getting drafted. Elliott had a bad combine, but was pretty good at the Senior Bowl. So there's kind of some hit or miss there. I think he's going to be a guy that if he doesn't get drafted, has a really good chance as a UDFA 53-man guy. And then you have Troy Pride, who's going to get drafted. I mean, he's an elite speed guy, which at corner always is a big deal. So he'll get drafted probably in the 3 to 4 range, maybe second round, kind of like how Claypool, if someone really likes him, he'll move up a little bit. And then Khalid Kareem obviously will get drafted probably in the middle rounds as well. A couple other guys, and Mason can kind of attest to this too, that have maybe like the slightest chance of getting drafted if a team falls in love with them, is someone like Chris Fink. A lot of people will kind of picture him on the Patriots, even with Tom Brady gone. Jameer Jones, who had an interesting career at Notre Dame. He probably should have redshirted at least one time during his career, but ended up playing 4 years straight through. I think he has a lot of natural talent that if he gets onto a team, he could surprise people. And then Asmar Bilal had a really good senior year and was a 2 or 3 year starter essentially at Notre Dame, and is essentially getting no look. Didn't get invited to the combine, but I think he's another guy that will be a UDFA and go somewhere and then possibly, prove himself somewhere.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I think you pretty much nailed it, but I think you are talking about probably 4 or 5 guys that will be drafted in the first, 3 to 4 rounds. So it should be really exciting for Notre Dame fans to watch the draft. It's not just linemen either. So really like skilled position guys that can really make a difference on the next level. When you're talking about Claypool, Kmet, Aquara, guys you're going to see playing on Sundays for years to come.
Charles Webb in the live chat had asked about Will Shipley, #1 rated all-purpose back out of Weddington High School, Matthews, North Carolina. Top 20 player in the nation. So we're talking way up there. According to the Crystal Ball projections on 247 Sports, courtesy Steve Whitfong, Notre Dame and Clemson neck and neck. You guys have a feel for him?
That's the consensus. It's he hasn't announced the top group, but everybody knows it's essentially Notre Dame and Clemson. I think Clemson fans are a little bit more confident than Notre Dame fans, but at the same time, I think that has to do with Clemson not really losing many recruiting battles recently. I don't mean that as a bad thing. We have some pretty good Notre Dame intel that we've heard that Notre Dame not necessarily leads, but they're right up there with Clemson. So I wouldn't be surprised either way. But again, Clemson has no reason to not be confident or cocky about recruiting because they pretty much land anybody they want right now. So it's going to be one of those two programs.
Yeah, right. Clemson can recruit just about anybody. If they want somebody, they get them 5-star, 4-star, you name it, any position they want. They're stacking up 5 stars at the moment. But Notre Dame has a lot of things in its favor. Academics, Shipley really likes it there. He has a great relationship with a lot of the guys in his class and current players. The one thing that is definitely in Clemson's favor, though, is the location. He's way closer to Clemson, a 2-hour drive for his family, who's really close. He's a family kid, to be able to watch him play rather than you're talking about a couple-hour flight, which is much more expensive, all the way to South Bend or wherever he may be playing. If the family wants to go to an away game and or an away Notre Dame game, but I'm sure they'd much rather see him play in South Bend. So location's a big thing. Not sure exactly who's gonna win out. Seems to be about 50-50, like you said. Nobody really knows except for him, but we are expecting a decision within the next week or two.
I don't even think he knows, to be completely honest with you.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. And then I don't know if Mason mentioned this. Sorry, I was kind of figuring something out over here. But I think there's also, and one of the things in Notre Dame's favor is the relationship he has with the recruits. So I think Mason mentioned the staff. He has a really good relationship with Lance Taylor, but he's mentioned several times that his best relationships are with the Notre Dame commits for 2021 versus any other program. So I think that's definitely in their favor too.
We talk college football here every day. We've got live streams. We've got bloggers, broadcasters that come on and talk to me, and of course analysis from myself. Call-in show every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Eastern time, so jump on board. You miss the live streams if you don't subscribe and get the notifications by turning on the bell. So please subscribe, turn on the bell, get the notifications, and when we go live here with Notre Dame Talk right now. And in just a few minutes, we talk Florida State football at 7 o'clock Eastern time, and maybe we'll talk 1993 again. I don't know. But I think I let both of you know that I thought it was quite interesting that I served up the 1993 scenario to the other two Florida State guys, and they both agreed that Notre Dame should have been awarded the national championship. But nobody's listening to me, unfortunately. So I would rewrite history in a number of ways. And that was another one of my claims last night when we were talking elite status, that 3/4 of the national championships can be debated. Not necessarily that the team that won it didn't deserve it, but because of the way the bowl games played out and the setup throughout most of college football history, there were typically 2-3 other teams that had just as much right to the national championship as the team that actually won the vote. That's just the
Mark,
way
you
it
got
is.
a few interesting comments on here that I want to get to if we have nothing else here.
Absolutely.
All right. So the one that really stuck out was from MSU fan who just commented it again. Could Nate beat Mason in an arm wrestling competition? Would they do it live? And where do I find it on YouTube? So I'm just going to leave that to Nathan, and I'll hit him back if he comes at me aggressively.
There's nothing aggressive here. Mason knows who would win that, so I don't have to say anything.
Wow. Okay.
That we don't know about here?
What's up?
No, I don't know where that came from at all.
Zero history of arm wrestling fights between me and Mason.
If I have to fly to Vegas to defend myself, I will.
That's already in the works, so we'll do it when you get here.
There it
Let's
is.
see what we got. Mark, who's your vote?
Oh man, I got to give a vote? Really? I got to choose between you two?
Yeah.
I got to see more than profile pictures. I've got to see maybe.
You can get one of Nathan's patented flexing pictures.
Hey. Yeah, I'll either be impressed or I'll automatically jump on Mason on that one.
Okay.
We'll see if I get impressed by.
There was some good ones, wide receiver and running back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to hit from Luke Brennan. What do you think of the receiving core this year, Nathan?
We touched on this a little bit last week. I mean, obviously losing Claypool, Fink, Cole Kmet. I mean, I know he's a tight end, but he was a big-time player for him in receiving-wise. I mean, that's going to be hard to replace. But Kevin Austin is a guy that Notre Dame fans have been waiting on for a couple of years now. One of the top-rated recruits that they've landed under Brian Kelly at wide receiver. Braden Lindsey's a burner, kind of a Will Fuller type speed. So if he can ever put everything together, then he's a huge weapon. Tommy Tremble had 4 touchdowns last year as the backup to Cole Kmet at tight end. So and he's an athletic freak for that position, in my opinion. And then they have a 5-star in Jordan Johnson coming in, who I think has some play, who can contribute. And then a grad transfer in Bennett Skoronik from Northwestern, who has had some good, put up some good numbers in his time. He probably would have been drafted this year. He got hurt early on for Northwestern and decided to grad transfer and kind of up his game a little bit before going to the draft. So no, I mean, I think they'll be fine. I mean, every year they seem to have a guy that steps up.
Nathan, are you secretly jealous of Mason's beard? Is that what's going on?
I'm
here?
secretly jealous of anyone that can grow a good beard. I don't know if Mason can, but
I don't get a lot right here, but I'll grow this out for you just for next week. It'll get thick. I just got it trimmed up today. But let's see what my wide receiver thoughts. Yeah, I think it'll be the production just about the same as last year. I think Austin steps into a Claypool type role, whether he puts up, the touchdowns or the yards that Claypool does, I don't know, but he replaces him as a like-for-like replacement. You still have Lindsey. Let's see. Yeah, you hit on Tremble. I think there's a shot that Mayer gets some playing time. Trying to see what else here. Lawrence Keys needs to step up.
McKinley, I guess, deserves to get a mention as well.
Right. Yeah. McKinley with his size, he's shown some game-breaking ability against bad teams given last year. But trying to think what else. I think that's about it. You didn't hit on Xavier Watts, but I'm not sure if this fall is going to be where he breaks out. But I think he has the potential to be better than Jordan Johnson as we look forward to the next couple of years in the Notre Dame receiving core.
Yeah, receiver is not really an issue for them right now, in my opinion. They can get enough talent, and then they've shown that they can go out and get transfers that can come in and produce right away too. The main reason I mentioned McKinley is I think he kind of gives me the Claypool Boykin vibe, where he could just have a really dominant senior season, possibly. You just never know. He has, he was obviously a top-rated recruit when he came out, and he did show some flashes last year when he finally was able to get on the field. So no, he could definitely be a guy that surprises, especially if Kevin Austin doesn't, get on the field or if he's not as good as advertised.
So we definitely have to answer questions that are accompanied by a super chat. The End Zone, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate it, helping us build the channel here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Want to encourage everyone to like, comment, share the videos on social media, and subscribe. The End Zone, how is Notre Dame's running back depth? Heard it's rough.
Rough is an interesting term. It's not the best. They do have a guy coming in that is a top-notch guy. We talked about him last week, and Chris Tyree. He's the type of true freshman that could possibly make a big impact. So hopefully he's able to step in and produce right away. He's probably not a 15 to 20 carry guy, at least early on. But if he can give you 5 to 10 carries or 5 to 10 touches a game, he could be really dangerous. But I think it boils down to if Jafar Armstrong can stay healthy. He wasn't the highest rated guy coming out. He was actually a wide receiver recruit coming out of high school. But everybody kind of always said he had more of a running back body. And during this first action at Notre Dame, he proved to be really good the first 4 games without Dexter Williams, and then Dexter Williams came back and he dominated the rest of the season. And then Jafar Armstrong was supposed to take over that role last year, but he got hurt early on. But I think me and Mason both agree that he has a lot of talent, and maybe some of the best running back talent that they've had there just in his body alone in the last 10 or so years. So if he can stay healthy, I think they have a really good chance of having a really good running game.
Yeah, he's a guy that both you and I were excited about. I think we both discussed him last year on Ben Belden's podcast as potentially a real breakout candidate and having just a great season, but it didn't happen. Suffered an unfortunate injury against Louisville first game of the season, never really looked the same after that. And then looking beyond him, you have Jameer Smith, who he looked okay in limited carries last year. Sibo Flemister is somebody I think with more time on the field, I think he could really be great for Notre Dame. Chris Tyree, like you said, 5 to 10 carries, that'll be good for him. And then, I think that's all I got on the running backs. If Jafar Armstrong stays healthy, that's good. If he moves back to slot wide receiver, like some people are saying, then you really got to hope that Tyree or Flemister steps up.
Yeah, and going off Flemister, because I think the same guy, the End Zone, mentioned Flemister just a couple of comments ago. He was another guy that wasn't necessarily the highest rated guy coming out of high school. I think they flipped him from like Georgia Southern or something like that. So it wasn't even a Power 5 program that they flipped him from. But towards the end of his recruitment, he started getting some more schools. I think Georgia Tech was involved. But no, I think he has a really good chance to be a pretty productive player if he's the lead back. He runs powerful, even though he's not the biggest guy. I think he has the straight line speed. And sort of, I don't know, maybe just kind of like that natural running ability that some guys don't necessarily have when you watch him run. So he could be a guy for sure.
I absolutely believe what the end zone just said. He said we played Flemister in high school and knocked my friend out cold. He definitely runs hard, and I think it's a breath of fresh air considering some of the ways that their name running backs have ran in recent times, not hitting the hole hard, not running over anybody, but trying to run east west, which drives me nuts. Just run north south, and Flemister definitely does that. Not afraid to put his head down and I guess knock somebody out.
And that's honestly why I like Armstrong too. I mean, when he came back last year after that injury, I could probably mention 2 or 3 times where, right before the first down marker, he's coming in, hot essentially for lack of a better word. And so I love the tenacity and power that he plays with, even though he runs a little bit upright, sort of like Josh Adams. But we know how Josh Adams was in college. He could break tackles like nobody or like anybody. So if they can get anything, if they can get any sort of production out of the running backs that is similar to what Dexter Williams was or Josh Adams was, then they'll be fine. And I think that they have a few guys on their roster that can certainly provide that.
We appreciate everyone stopping by for Notre Dame football talk here on a Monday night. We should be back next Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Definitely want to thank both Nathan Urbach and Mason Plummer from Slap the Sign. Remind you that we will have our Twitter Notre Dame college football question posted on Twitter, which involves Notre Dame's best prospect to succeed at the NFL draft. I think we've got a good discussion point and Twitter question for next week when we'll look at Notre Dame's over-under according to Vegas, which is right now at 9.5. So we'll look at the personnel versus the schedule and get your thoughts in the live chat on Notre Dame's over-under of 9.5 and serve that up as a poll question for next week. All right, guys, appreciate you stopping by. Again, it's Slap the Sign with Mason Plummer and also Nathan Urbach. Jump on over there and check out Notre Dame football coverage. Appreciate you guys stopping by. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mark. I'll be making sure to do my curls in the meantime for some arm wrestling.
Yeah, if nothing else, it may not serve practical, but you'll look good, at least before the actual competition. You might intimidate Nathan.
Right, yeah. He's intimidated already. I can see it. He's so intimidated. That's why he keeps muting his mic.
Yeah, it's going to be Mason beard, Mason biceps, 2-zip on you, Nathan. It's going to be tough to come back from. If he's got you on the beard and the biceps.
I don't see it.
We'll see you guys soon.
Thanks.